Again, why
this
county
district
commission as opposed to the state house seat?
Well, that's a background. Look, that Democratic primary was stacked. The candidate in there right now is Judy Stern's daughter. Switched parties, came into the race. Frida Stevens came into that race. There were a lot of stories as about why. So I could fight for a primary up against the very same people I've gone against as an activist, who are clearly intent on saying, whatever your role is, we don't want you to get lost, and have what effect? Where does Judy Stern, George Platt, Bernie Friedman, and all of them feed? They don't feed off of Tallahassee. They don't feed off the State House. They feed off the County Commission. They stick their fingers and their paws into the trough of the tax dollar, and they squander it. And they get their 1%, and then residents of Broward County beg for bus routes and libraries. It's part of my campaign. I'm no to the airport expansion. I do not like the super long runway on the south. $71.5 million was given as a grant on August 10th, the same day they passed ethics reform. They did it in the morning. And the very next day, George Platt and Alex Heckler, two very powerful lobbyists who represent a lot of clients who are going to be vendors that service and do that project. He was in 5 of the remaining 8 commissioners' offices the next day. 5, that's an interesting number. That's what you need to pass and get a vendor a contract. And they'll get 1% of every vendor that gets a contract off of what should be, in the end, $1.3 billion.
So you're running for a county commission basically to go after Judy Stern? And
not to go after.
Well, but that's what I'm hearing. I guess let me ask it again, because I'm looking for a global view. If I'm the voter out there...
Value for the dollar, and knowing very clearly that in the mornings, in the meetings, they appropriate millions of dollars, and then in the afternoon they make us beg for basic services. I'm frustrated by that, and I see a way to do something about that.
All right. What basic services would you identify as this district needing?
Broward County as a whole. First off, buses. Broward County is built off tourism and retirement. So every single person that goes and makes a bed at these new swanky hotels we built on Fort Lauderdale Beach, they take the bus to work. And a lot of people came down to South Florida to retire because when they knew they'd need in-home service, they knew there were a base of employees in Broward County that could come into their homes and provide them with that basic service. The people that provide that service, for the most part, they take the bus. So I will tell you this, I watched today, just coming over here at a red light, 3 buses in a row, all different numbers, all basically driving the same exact route. To sit there and say cut, cut, cut without offering any vision of where we go, how we go, where we're trying to get with the buses, I think they're asleep at the wheel. And I think for the County Commission, 2 weeks ago, to put $50 million towards courthouse parking structures on a courthouse they haven't built, and then again making us beg for basic services, there's a disconnect. Library hours, we found out
yesterday. You opposed the courthouse?
I am opposed to building the courthouse where they want to build it. I think that needs to be reviewed. I think we need to take a breath. If it's a plumbing issue, can we fix the plumbing and then actually create a long-term plan for where we're going to put a courthouse? If they don't build that courthouse on the parking lot in front of the prison to give us a completely new aesthetic look for downtown Fort Lauderdale on the river, then they're going to miss a real good opportunity to take full advantage of land they already own, space they already own.
I mean, except, and let me be a little bit of devil's advocate on that, and clearly as a taxpayer you want the best, most efficient process for building a new courthouse.
If you're going to spend $254 million, who wouldn't as a business person? Exactly. That's exactly what I'd want.
Exactly, but let's face it, there's a certain reality too, in that there is a political constraint. There's no question. I think even the people, the most ardent opponents of the new courthouse will not argue that you need a new one. They just argue about how it got done.
Sure.
Okay? We went through initially to put a bond referendum before the voters. It got shot down miserably. There would be
no question it failed.
Any bond or any kind of money for a courthouse in this environment goes down.
Right.
Done. Which then leaves it in the hands of 9 people in the commission. Whether you like them or not, it basically leaves it in their hands. And when you do, you're going to have, in the normal course of politics, you're going to have politics. Which means that whatever I think is the ideal, or Doug may think is the ideal, or you may think the ideal is, it's going to be really hard to visualize because you've got 9 other people and their staffs and everybody's got their vested interests.
Right.
So when I ask that question, what I'm really looking for is not the ideal, but what is the doable. We know what they've decided, and in terms of knowing that whatever the ideal is, you're just not going to get there. you know, how close to the ideal is it? Is this something that you could live with, or is this something that you think is completely unpalatable? What is going to go there?
It's not just the courthouse, it's all the services, it's all the support, it's the fact that they're building the parking garages. It comes down to priorities. The economy is cyclical. It's going to come back. It's very likely we're finding a base in the real estate prices if what we're reading in the paper is true, and I hope it is. The Fed is saying that, you know, we've paid off our debt. Americans are saving, which should lead to better consumption going in early next year. There's a real good chance this economy is going to turn around. I think we need to pause on projects like the courthouse, because you're talking about an investment. What's wrong with the building we built? We let politics play its part when they built it in the first place, and I think we got some shoddy construction. I think we ended up with a bad vendor. And if that vendor is bidding on this project, I think we should reconsider their participation. Because God, we used to build things that lasted 100 years. Now we're doing drop and lift construction in buildings that leak, schools that leak 3 years after they're finished. We're not getting value for the dollar. Now, yes, the county commission is a legislative position, but don't conduct the orchestra if you don't know how to play the instruments. And I can tell you a big difference between some of the people sitting up there and what I'd like to do. I'd like to shadow some of the different departments in the county so that I can watch and see what's happening and learn, so I can go back to the county administrator and ask, why did we just repave a road, but the lines are all over the place? Why do we repave a road and there's a seam down the road? Why are we pumping millions of dollars of sand on the beach, but never planting a dune or seagrass to make sure it stays there? You know, you had one candidate tell you we're going to build a water park. Well, I wonder if he knew what was happening down at Dolphin Stadium. How about we worry about the beach? I've done a little bit of research on the ASR wells, aquifer storage and recovery wells, the way we deal with sewage water here in Broward County. That doesn't include the 287 million gallons that we still pump into the ocean every single day on the remaining 5 outflows. We have an overpass being built from Deerfield to Boca. Where was a shovel-ready project to build a new water treatment facility? Now, there's 2 big costs there. You got to build the facility and treat the water, then you got to lay the purple pipe so you can find someone to sell it to. Those are 2 different costs. I'd like to build the water treatment facility yesterday or as soon as possible, and so what we do pump into the ocean is crystal clear water. And you might see the color blue back in the ocean again off the beaches of Fort Lauderdale. Right now it's green. It reminds me of the Jersey Shore when I was a kid before they cleaned up the Hudson River. If tourism is one of the economic bedrocks on the foundation that Broward County's built, when are we going to take responsibility? Can I tell you the truth? I'd delay the courthouse. That is a plumbing problem. Go in and fix the plumbing. We lined the pipes. I served on the board of trustees of my high school. The sister school was in St. Petersburg, and we had plumbing problems. And we used new technology, lined the pipes. It wasn't a long-term solution, but it was a good solution. And why don't we commit to things that actually are going to affect every single person's life in this county, like cleaning up the ocean, so that when a tourist comes and walks on the beach, it's not dirty and grimy, it's clean, it's appealing, it's the place they want to come back to, it's the place they want to bring their family, it's the place that when they go on and have kids, they'll want to come back with their kids. We're losing that. And that is a direct result of a disconnect. It's a direct result of what has become this culture of corruption in Broward County, where, don't say it as I'm going after them, no, I'm simply putting my foot down and saying enough. Because for too many years now, a small group of players have siphoned off what they consider their rightful cut of our tax dollars. Their elected officials then go in and do all these great things in Broward County, like building buildings on Fort Lauderdale Beach that block out the sun before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. There's a disconnect. A small group of people are getting rewarded, and the rest of us are watching Broward County get destroyed.
Okay. What other priorities would you, if you were elected, what other priorities would you want to accomplish?
Well, the money first, because the runway, we can still intervene and get in there. The longest term legacy that I'd like to see, the mark I'd like to leave on Broward County is planting dunes on the beach. At Point of America, if you started doing vertical lines of seagrass, as that sand continues to build and grow up on that dune, that beach will start to march forward. I hate to bring up the Jersey Shore again. It's a great state. New Jersey's a great state. They had beach erosion problems years ago. And when I was a kid near Atlantic City, they started planting the dunes, putting up the wind catch fence. And it took 15 years, it took 20 years, but those beaches started to grow. So as the sand would pile up and the vegetation would hold it in place, it actually would start to march towards the ocean. The biggest thing is, it's squandering of money. It's asking the question of unintended consequences. It's asking the question of committing $44 million to beach renourishment, but knowing it's going to be $2 million every single year into perpetuity just to maintain it. And no one ever asks the question of, when do you plant the seagrass? There's a disconnect. Coming from business, this money is an investment. If we build a courthouse, to me it's going to be an investment, and that better be a building with a guaranteed useful life of 50 years plus. Otherwise, I'm going to think we'll have done a disservice to the taxpayers of Broward County.
And then you say you had problems with the runway extension of the airport. What do you say to those who say, oh, it's good for business, that, we've got to have a viable airport, blah, 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 blah. What's your response?
The airport authority is a wonderful, somewhat autonomous bureaucracy that gets to recommit what apparently would be profits in any other venture back into expansion. We have more terminals there than we need, more terminals than airplanes ever come into. But there were two runway ideas. There was a long runway idea, which they're committing to build, which had engineering challenges that drove the cost through the roof. Then there was the potential for a smaller runway. Economic engines, well, if we're reaching in our pocket and it turns into a money pit, that's not an economic engine. That's a drain on the taxpayer base. Miami-Dade committed $3 billion to expand the runway. Cost them $6.3 billion. And in one of the South Florida papers, the airport director down there said he doesn't see traffic growing in the next 30 years to justify the expansions they did. So we're going to build a second runway, which will put us into competition with Miami, which doesn't see enough traffic coming into their facilities. Let's get to another part. What do we need? This big runway is for larger airplanes. Is Fort Lauderdale part of the hub and spoke, or is that model starting to fail in aviation? Or does Fort Lauderdale want to become a regional destination where, with a shorter runway, the 50, 100 passenger planes like the Embraer, AirTran, and Southwest just merged. They're not big jumbo jets flying international routes. These are regional carriers that are transitioning from what was a turboprop fleet into small passenger service. Fort Lauderdale is very well positioned to take advantage of that, to redefine our airport as a regional destination or a regional hub. We actually compete more with the airport outside of Naples than I would say we're competing with Miami. If we take the wrong path, we're going to put a second runway up that we'll never be able to pay off, and the taxpayers of Broward County will never see a return on the investment in the airport. It'll become a drain. But there's a chance. The smaller runway, look, if you're going from Naples, what are you going to do? Come down 595. Do you want to take the right and go to Miami? Do you want to take the left and go up to Palm Beach? No, you want to pull right into Fort Lauderdale Airport. But if it's not going where you're going, why would you make the drive and come across? Why would you use our facility? We have a chance to define what we do with this airport, and that big runway, that's a boondoggle. That's going to make a small group of people very wealthy at the expense of the residents of this county.
Chris, you make a case for yourself. Do you have a case to make to the voters about your opponents? Why you're better than they are? Or,
well, I could tell you one distinction. I filed my report yesterday, so it'll be up today. I've gone on one lunch on my campaign. I paid for it out of my own pocket, and I listed it as an in-kind contribution to the campaign for myself. Ken Keachel, of course, has been living basically off of his campaign account for almost 3 years now, between the rent and going out to eat regularly. And if you look at Chip Marker's report, his very first report, within days of filing his first campaign report, he had two very big expenditures. $4,000 for a poll, and then $1,600 to reimburse himself for meals. I hope those were all meals he had after he opened his account, because if those are meals he had before he opened his account and was saving the receipts, that's a little bit of a no-no under Florida campaign finance law. Distinction. When I spoke out the day they did ethics reform, I watched a current elected official walk in late after the question was called. And the mayor sat there and fumbled for a piece of paper and said, I know I have the memo, I know this person's here, and he invited that person to come up and speak. Breaking the rules of the chamber. You got to be checked in before the question's called. When I asked Commissioner Keachel about that later, he said that's a professional courtesy. There's no such thing. When you walk up in